Tanham's importance, however, lies not only in what he said, but in how his argument was framed and how it was received. His goal was not to celebrate civilizations or reinterpret ancient texts. His goal was practical. He wanted to understand how states think about security and how predictable their behavior is. His expectations of strategic thought were shaped by Western traditions, built around written doctrines, formal military theory, and continuous debate about power. When Tanham looked at India, he was looking for these markers, and when he did not find them, he concluded that Indian strategic thinking was weak, fragmented, or underdeveloped. One of the most important aspects of his essay is that it is not an accusatory in tone. It doesn't say India is irrational or incapable. Instead, he repeatedly describes Indian strategic thinking as under-articulated and diffuse. His concern was less about intentions and more about absence of clarity. This brings us to major criticism of Tanham. Many scholars argue that Tanham treated strategic thought as a universal category rather than a culturally shaped one. He assumed that strategy must look like Western strategy. Critics point out that this assumption itself is problematic. Indian political thought has historically been comfortable with ambiguity. It often values flexibility over rigid doctrine. Strategic reasoning may exist, but not in the form of grand theories or explicit manuals. In this sense, Tanham may have mistaken difference for absence. Another critique focuses on his treatment of classical Indian texts. While he acknowledged the existence of works like Arthashastra, he dismissed them as isolated rather than part of a living tradition. Critics argue that this underestimates their long-term influence on Indian political imagination. Tanham's defenders respond by saying that influence without continuity does not amount to a strategic tradition. A tradition, they argue, requires debate, refinement, and transmission across generations. On this point, Tanham remained firm. A third criticism concerns his limited engagement with post-independence India. His essay was written at a time when India had deliberately avoided publishing defense doctrines and strategic white papers. Critics argue that Tanham mistook secrecy and caution for conceptual absence. Related to this is the argument that Tanham underestimated the role of democracy. Strategic thinking in democratic systems is rarely neat or unified. It is shaped by elections, coalitions, public opinion, and moral constraints. Expecting clean strategic doctrine from such a system may be unrealistic. Despite these critics, Tanham's essay continues to be cited, debated, and taught. Why? Because Tanham forced scholars to confront uncomfortable questions. Why did India avoid articulating strategy for so long? Why was a strategic debate confined to a small elite? Why did India rely so heavily on ad hoc decision making? Even critics accept that he identified a real problem of articulation, even if they disagree with his conclusions. In later years, Tanham himself softened some of his claims. He acknowledged that Indian strategic thinking might exist in forms that Western analysts find difficult to recognize. But he remained concerned about the lack of open debate and written doctrine. In that sense, Tanham did not provide the final word on Indian strategic thought, but he changed the conversation. And sometimes asking the wrong question in the right way can be more influential than giving the right answer.